the last component of Delhi Sultanate, Bhakti and Sufi movements, right? Bhakti movement for Hinduism when it comes to Sufi movement for Islam. So what is Bhakti movement for Hinduism? Sufi movement for Islam, right? So the main motto of Bhakti and Sufi movements, that is to reduce or to eradicate the conservative elements. Conservative elements in both the religions, right? So before getting the details of what are the components of Bhakti movement and what were the the sects, the subsets of Bhakti movement and Sufi movements, what does it mean by movement? Right? Any wild guess? What does it mean by movement? Right? Change. Change for new, right? Saying something. So change through non-violence, movement. So movement is meant for change. Good. So movement is meant for change, and even protest is also meant for change. Revolution is also meant for change. Hartal, Bandh, we have different technical terms, revolts. Everything is meant for change, but the way you get the change in other ways, that is which are associated with violence when it comes to movement, through non-violence. That is the reason we are using the term called Bhakti movement and Sufi movement. So the respective scholars, broad-minded scholars from Hinduism, broad-minded scholars from Islam, they made efforts to pluck out the conservative elements from Hinduism and from Islam. The same stuff we have learnt as part of the 6th century BC. Right? Socio-religious, so new religious movements. And we've also learnt as part of post-Guptan age, that is Tamil devotional movement, Alvars and Nayanars, Tamil devotional movement. Now we were discussing Bhakti movement. Right? So as far as Bhakti movement is concerned, when we understand the origin of Bhakti movement, and one more thing we shall keep in mind, the concept called Bhakti is not new to India and not new to Hinduism. Right? Reason being, there were right from the beginning, there were so many texts which started talking about Bhakti. Now learned as part of Shruti literature and Smriti literature. In Shruti literature we have 4 components. What were they? Vedas, Aranyakas, Brahmanas and Upanishads. One of the Upanishads by name Shveteshvatara Upanishad. How many Upanishads do we have? 108 Upanishads. Out of 108 Upanishads, one Upanishad called Shveteshvatara Upanishad, which started talking about Bhakti. Besides Shveteshvatara Upanishad, we have Bhagavad Gita. Vasudeva Krishna, Bhagavati religion, Bhagavad Gita. Besides Bhagavad Gita, we have Mahabharat. Besides Mahabharat, we have Jayadeva's Gita Govinda. Right? So all these the texts, they started talking about Bhakti. So Bhakti is not, my point is, Bhakti is not new for India nor new for Hindus. Right? But unfortunately, it was maximum times it was discarded by selfish priestly class. So the movement, that is Bhakti movement, revolves around Bhakti. The movement revolves around Bhakti, thereby it is called as Bhakti movement. The question is, why we started talking about Bhakti from 13th century onwards? Because we were discussing 13th century, the history of 13th century, so Delhi Sultanate and all that. Why only from 13th century onwards? Reason being, with the advent of Islam to Hindustan, many low caste Hindus, you call different the technical terms, you call Shudras, you call Panchamas, you call Chandalas, untouchables and all. In simple, untouchables of Hindu society, they started rushing towards Islam, alternative. How Jainism, Buddhism, Ajivika, Nyaya, Samkhya became an alternative for Vedic religion, Vedic society in 6th century BC. Now Islam became an alternative for Shudras in 8th century, 9th century, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, it went on. And over a period of time, by 16th century, we're going to learn in subsequent classes, by 16th century, a new faith entered, that is obviously so downtrodden sections of Hindu society, they looked at alternative because they're not happy with the religion in which they born and brought up. They're not happy with the society in which they born and brought up. What does it mean? There are so many disabilities imposed on these people. Right? Outcome, they started going here and there. Right? Under these circumstances, the broad-minded Brahmins, it's quite interesting to know. It was Brahmin community which introduced all stuff, disabilities, restrictions, all stuff. And the same Brahmin community made efforts to pluck out these stuff. Right? There is the problems create Jesharo, Valle, solution kuda vetkaru. Mahan Bhavru. So the broad-minded priestly class, took the responsibility to change or to modify Hindu society, to modify Hindu religion. What for? To stop migration. To stop migration. So they convinced themselves, if we follow the same stuff, so we'll make efforts to change the stuff, right? Change the society, change the religion, right? So the main motto of Bhakti movement, one is to stop the migration, and by reforming Hinduism to continue the legacy of Hinduism. To stop the migration and to reform Hindu religion, Hindu society. Right? So Bhakti movement revolves around moksha. Already we discussed here and there. Once again, please. Moksha, salvation. Vedic religion says if you want to perform, if you want to get moksha, you're supposed to perform 16 rituals and sacrifices. From where to where? From mother's womb to the tomb. From conception to cremation. 16 types of rituals. Star mark conditions apply. Only dvijas to be performed, not ekajas. When I say ekajas, women of all castes and the men of Shudra caste. Outcome, we have learnt in the previous sessions as part of Vedic civilization and all, Vedic religion was within the reach of dvijas. Vedic religion was not within the reach of all sections of society. So there were so many restrictions imposed on ekajas, and better not to talk about women. Women were not allowed to get, they were not allowed to perform rituals and sacrifices. Right? So on one hand, women were not happy with Vedic religion. When I say women of all castes and the men of Shudra caste. So someone has come with alternative Buddhism, someone has come with alternative Jainism, Ajivika religion, Charvaka and others. So all these people, they rushed towards the respective religions. Over a period of time we have learned, that is revival of Brahmanical religion with a little bit reforms. But over a period of time, when I say over a period of time, by the time Guptans became the rulers of Indian subcontinent, and Guptans were the lovers of Hinduism. Right? So once again, the so-called disabilities were imposed on different sections of people. Right? Same dominations, same disabilities. Right? And by this time, Islam entered India, that is 8th century AD. So whatever the sections which are associated with disabilities, so these sections rushed towards Islam. Now if someone asks the question, then what was the method through which, or the process through which a person can get salvation according to Hindu religion? No doubt Hindu religion, it's an bhakti oriented, no doubt about it. But because of selfish priestly class, bhakti was replaced by 16 rituals and sacrifices. ఏదైనా ఒక మతము తప్పుదారిలో వెళ్తుందంటే ఆ తప్పు మతానిది కాదనమాట, వాటిని నడిపించే ప్రీస్ట్లీ క్లాస్. ఏ మతం కూడా శ్రద్ధగా ఉంది. వాట్ ఎవర్ రిలీజన్ యూ టాక్ అబౌట్, ఇట్స్ ఆల్ అబౌట్ ప్రీస్ట్లీ క్లాస్, రైట్? So in order to, like, so reduce the rituals, reduce say sacrifices, reduce the domination of Brahmanical sect and all, so broad-minded priestly class, broad-minded Brahmins, let me tell you, they initiated the process, and for our convenience we use the term called Bhakti movement. So what we supposed to understand, for exam point of view, Bhakti saints or Bhakti scholars came up with different paths. What for? Salvation. So for example, we are going to discuss Shankaracharya. He came up with a method, a path. Ramanujacharya, he came up with a path. What for? Salvation. Vallabhacharya came up with a path for salvation. Ramananda, so North Indian Bhakti saint, he came up with a path. Kabir, he he has his own path. Guru Nanak, what not? So by opposing the existing paths which are extremely discriminative, which are extremely biased, gender biased and what not, so broad-minded scholars or Bhakti saints, they came up with different paths and different philosophies. Advaita, Dvaita, Dvaita, of different the philosophies and all. Now before getting the details of different philosophies, start with what are the components of Bhakti, right? Components of Bhakti or features of Bhakti movement, right? To begin with, mysticism. Mysticism, right? Mysticism is the English version of Bhakti, please. So mysticism is nothing but self-surrenderance to God, self-submission to God. One of the components of Bhakti, you shall lay down yourself to the God. You shall submit yourself to the God. So when you submit yourself to the God, there won't be any the mediator, right? See, you can't imagine Vedic religion without mediator. What do we call mediator in Vedic religion? Brahmin. And you can't imagine Hindu religion without mediators. Same Brahmins, right? So there shouldn't be any mediator. For that, you shall follow Bhakti. Bhakti is nothing but mysticism. Mysticism means you shall submit yourself to the God. So reducing the middleman between devotee and God, one of the components of Bhakti. Right. Besides, it's an anti-rituals. Anti-rituals and sacrifices. Anti-rituals and sacrifices. So Bhakti saints promoted the ritual concept, the sacrifices concept, deliberately introduced by priestly class. What for? For their livelihood. So you just discard them. Right? You emphasize over how best you can establish the relationship with God. What kind of relationship? Direct relationship, right? Without mediator, right? So anti-rituals. Another, anti-image worship. Anti-image worship. See, when I say rituals, we have different types of rituals. And few Bhakti saints we are going to learn, especially we have the two sects in Bhakti movement, need not just listen. One is Niguna followed by Saguna. Saguna Bhakti saints promoted rituals. When I say promoted rituals, limited rituals, right? Saguna Bhakti saints promoted limited image worship, limited idolatry when it comes to forget about Niguna sect. Right? We're going to learn. So anti-image worship. Right? So Bhakti movement emphasizes over we shall worship God in abstract form. అంటే మనకు తెలుగులో ఒక హెవీ డైలాగ్ ఉంది, భగవంతుడు సర్వాంతర్యామి. సో మీరు భగవంతుడు సర్వాంతర్యామి అన్నప్పుడు మీరు ఎందుకు భగవంతుడిని ఒక చోట పెడుతున్నారు? ఆ చోట అంటే టెంపుల్ అనమాట. సో గాడ్ ఈజ్ ఎవ్రీవేర్, రైట్? సో డోంట్ రిలే ఆన్ ఇమేజ్ వర్షిప్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్. అండ్ వన్ మోర్, anti-Brahmanical, right? Anti-Brahmanical. If you observe, all these stuff you have learnt as part of post-Mauryan age Bhagavata religion, right? Vasudeva Krishna. But Vasudeva Krishna emphasized over 5 deities. Panchayatan, right? 5 deities. So say Bhagavata religion stands on 5 deities. Vasudeva Krishna, Balarama, Samba, Pradyumna and Anirudh. 5, right? So totally 3 generations we have learned, right? Panchayatan. Right? So even that Bhagavad religion also emphasizes over bhakti, anti-rituals, anti-image worship, anti-Brahmanical. Right? And one more component, that is even anti-Sanskrit. Anti-Sanskrit. So what does it mean by anti-Sanskrit? The Bhakti saints promoted vernaculars, local languages, because Sanskrit always is the language of microscopic minorities. So with this background, write down a previous question. The first statement, the Bhakti saints of South India, wrote books in Tamil. The Bhakti saints of South India wrote books in Tamil. Second statement, Bhakti saints promoted vernacular languages. Bhakti saints promoted vernacular languages. Same, option A, only 1 correct. Option B, only 2. Option C, both 1 and 2. And option D, neither 1 nor 2. So read the statements, 2 statements carefully, and you can answer them. What is the right answer? So Sneha Reddy says only 2 correct, and other student says option 2 is correct. Any other? So many says option C is the right answer. Both the statements are correct. Fine. So another student says option C. Both the statements are correct. Right. So as far as this particular question is concerned, the right answer for this question only B, please. That is second statement alone correct. Let me tell you, the Bhakti saints of South India, we are going to learn especially Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Vallabhacharya and all, like the other Bhakti saints. The Bhakti saints of South India wrote books in not Tamil but in Sanskrit. Whereas Bhakti saints of Deccan, Maharashtra, Bhakti saints of Andhra region, Bhakti saints of North India, Eastern India, Western India, all wrote in vernaculars. మాకేం తెలుసు సార్ వర్నాకులర్ అని చెప్తే మేము నూకినాం హోతా रहता है. Right. So with this background, the next one is the next component of Bhakti movement based on nature of the worship. Bhakti scholars or Bhakti movement broadly divided into 2 categories, that is Saguna Bhakti and Niguna Bhakti. Please. Saguna Bhakti, Niguna Bhakti. Telugulo Sadgunamu, Nirgunamu antam. Saguna, Niguna. Can you know what is the difference between Saguna and Niguna?
Form and form.
Good. Which one is form? Saguna. This is form, and here no form. Abstract. So Saguna Bhakti sect believes in you can worship God in human form. Star markers apply limited image worship. మా సార్ చెప్పినాడు కదండి ప్రతి ఒక్కరిని దాన్ని కూర్చోకూడదు అనమాట. సో లిమిటెడ్ వర్షిప్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్. సో ఫామ్, సో ద సెక్ట్ వర్షిప్స్ ద గాడ్ in the form of the human, right? The form. Then how about here Niguna? It's an abstract form. Why all of a sudden Bhakti saints started talking about God in the abstract form? You must understand, because the scholars or Bhakti saints were associated with this particular sect. They were extremely influenced by Islam. They are influenced by Islam. Because in Islam, there is no form worship. Muslims do worship God, Almighty God, in abstract form. So God is omnipotent. Chapman? No, not schism. Like, I repeat, based on nature of worship, based on nature of promotion, for our convenience, Bhakti saints broadly divide into two categories, right? Not schism. Say, for example, when I say schism, so you have philosophy. We'll be going to talk about Advaita philosophy. Right? If you come across differences of opinions among the followers of Advaita, now we call this phenomenon as schism. Right? Now I am talking about nature. Right? So based on nature of Bhakti movement, we have two sects, that is Saguna sect and Niguna sect. Saguna sect promotes idolatry, promotes the image worship, little bit image worship, little bit they also allow little bit rituals. Right? It was not the case of Niguna. So Niguna sects outrightly rejected the form worship, human worship, and especially image worship, rituals worship. Right? The best example is the gentleman Kabir, please. Kabir, who belonged to Niguna sect, he says he outrightly rejected, that is image worship. He says, "Agar pahan pooje to hari mile, to main pooju pahar," he says. Pahan, a small stone. Pahar, a big hillock. Right? You are believing and you are worshipping a small stone as if you are going to get salvation. If it is the case, I am ready to worship a big hillock, and obviously I am going to get first salvation than you, because your God is Chinna God, my God is Pedda God. So we call this kind of criticism sarcastic criticism. అంటే వ్యంగ్యంగా విమర్శించడం అన్నమాట, కొట్టకుండానే నొప్పి తెలుస్తుంది అన్నమాట, వ్యంగ్య విమర్శలు అంటాం. Kabir, popularly called as radical Bhakti saint. On one hand, he criticized image worship. On the other hand, he criticized rituals. You might have studied in lower classes, Kabir ke dohe, doha. So on one occasion, Kabir says, why the hell you are going to the sacred, what do we call, places, and going and having holy dips and all that. హిందూ మతంలో పవిత్ర స్నాన కాన్సెప్ట్ అనమాట. ఏమంటుంది దాని టెక్నికల్ టైం ఏమంటుంది? పుష్కరాలు. సో గోయింగ్ అండ్ గెటింగ్ holy dips in river Ganga, like holy rivers we generally consider it. So he says, if you feel that going and having holy dips in river Ganga and river Yamuna, whatever you have rivers, so you are going to get salvation, or you are going to get some sort of virtues. If it is the case, fishes and frogs would get first, right? Because they are always in. And let me tell you, Kabir, he did not concentrate the evil elements or irrational aspects, unscientific aspects of Hinduism, equally followed Islam. He followed equality before law. Now, why the hell you are going to Mecca and Medina, right? You are saying God is everywhere. Why the hell you are going there, right? All the way, thousands and thousands of kilometers. Radical, right? Even Kabir was a radical, Guru Nanak was a radical. Right? Unfortunately, they are made as gods by disciples. Right? That's what history taught us. Best example, Gautam Buddha. Right? Gautam Buddha nowhere mentioned, నేను పోయిన తర్వాత నన్ను నూకడని చెప్పలేదు అనమాట. ఫాలోవర్స్ చారని చేయమంటే వారని చేస్తాను అనమాట. రేపు 10th తలైవ సినిమా ఉంది కదా, మామూలు నూకడు అనమాట. అప్పుడే 100 పాల ప్యాకెట్లు రెడీ పెట్టుకున్నారు. సార్ వచ్చిండు నువ్వు కన్నా అని చెప్తున్నాడు. వీళ్ళకు ఇళ్ళలో టీ తాగడానికి పాల్గొనే ఉన్నాడు. అన్ఫార్చునేట్. అభిమానం ఉండాలి, ఒక లిమిట్ ఉండాలి. సార్ ఎక్కడికి వెళ్ళిపోతున్నాం? ఓకేనా, చలో. సో ఇట్స్ ఆల్ అబౌట్ భక్తి, ప్లీజ్. నౌ విత్ దిస్ బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్, start with the origin and evolution of Bhakti movement. Origin of Bhakti movement. When you go through previous question papers, as one of the previous questions, that is the question asked the origin of Bhakti movement. Even the origin of Sufi movement, please. The question asked in this way, even say the saga of Bhakti movement. For example, Bhakti movement born and brought up in South India. I repeat, Bhakti movement born and brought up in South India, we are going to discuss. From South India, it travelled to Deccan. When I say Deccan, Maharashtra. Right? From Deccan, Bhakti movement travelled to North India. From North India, Bhakti movement travelled to Eastern India. And from North India, Bhakti movement travelled to Western India. So this is the origin and the spread. So like the evolution of Bhakti movement. Right? So Bhakti movement born and brought up in South India and gradually had spread to other parts of Indian subcontinent. Then how about Sufi movement? As far as Sufi movement is concerned, Sufi movement born and brought up in Central Asia came to northwestern India. Sufi movement born and brought up in Central Asia, especially at a place called Baghdad. We are going to learn the capital of Iraq. So from Baghdad, it travelled to northwestern India. From northwestern India to Western India. From Western India to North India, and from North India to Deccan and South India. From Central Asia to northwestern India, from northwestern India to Western India, from Western India to North India, North India to Deccan and South India. Now start with Bhakti movement hyphen South India. Bhakti movement hyphen South India. So Adi Shankaracharya. So discussing Bhakti movement born and brought up in South India, travelled to Deccan, from Deccan to North, from North to West, from North to East. So we supposed to understand what are the prominent Bhakti saints in South India and what were their respective philosophies and what kind of paths, what kind of say paths followed by or propounded by the respective Bhakti saints for salvation. Our target is salvation, let me tell you. It's all about moksha, salvation. Moksha, Sanskrit term, English version, salvation. So before we get the details of the philosophy of Adi Shankaracharya, we will have the brief history of Adi Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya, he was born in 788 AD at a place called Kaladi. Kerala, a small village, remote village. So he was born in the year 788 AD at a place called Kaladi in a poor Brahmin caste or Brahmin family, right? And died at a place called Kedarnath in the year 820 AD, right? It's very younger age he passed away, right? 820 AD. Kedarnath, which comes in Uttarakhand, please. Devabhumi, the land of gods. So very general content. When I say Adi Shankaracharya born and brought up in Brahmin family, so Brahmin caste, obviously he must be good at Vedas, he must be good at Shastras. Right? So he went through Vedas, he went through Upanishads, he went through other Sanskrit literature. The contemporary sources, traditional sources tell us he served as a priest here and there in the temples and all, and he found there was the massive what we call conflicts between Shaivism and Vaishnavism. So he wanted to bring these two rival sects under one umbrella. Thereby he started a new sect called Hari Hara sect. Adi Shankaracharya started a new sect called Hari Hara sect. Who is Hari? Lord Vishnu, please. Hara, Lord Shiva, right? So the worship of both the gods, Hari Hara. The followers of Shankaracharya or the followers of Hari Hara sect were called as Smarthas. My previous question again. The followers were called as Smarthas. Smarthas were the followers of Shankaracharya, as Smarthas worship Hari Hara. And Adi Shankaracharya came up with a philosophy called Advaita. Advaita philosophy. So when you go through previous question papers, you do come across questions on Bhakti and Sufi movements, especially on the respective philosophies. On one hand, names of the philosophies, on the other hand, their propounders. We have Advaita, Dvaita, Dvaita, Vishishta Advaita. We have these philosophies. Advaita philosophy. The English version of Advaita philosophy, that is non-dualism. Non-dualism. So when we understand the summary of Advaita philosophy, Dvaita means two. Dvai, two. Ta, philosophy, right? Or some sort of avatar kind of, Treta. But we are using the term called not two, but one, right? Prachya, Aprachya. Prachya means Eastern people, right? Aprachya means Western people. Right? So, Dvaita, Advaita. So, what is this not two but one? According to Shankaracharya, God, that is Paramatma, and soul, Atma. So, Atma and Paramatma, they were not different but same, one. దయాల గురించి చెప్తాను, దయాలు ఆత్మలు కాదు, కొంచెం ఫిలాసాఫికల్ టచ్ అనమాట. ఇంతమంది ఆత్మలు అంటే ఎట్లా చూస్తున్నారు అనమాట, మన కాన్సెప్ట్ తీసుకొస్తారు అసలు. So according to Adi Shankaracharya's Advaita philosophy, not two but one. When I say not two but one, Atma and Paramatma are the same. In what way they are the same? According to Adi Shankaracharya, Atma comes from Paramatma. The soul comes from Almighty God and takes birth, lives on the earth maybe 60 years or maybe 40 years. ఏముంది డైలీ దాక్కుంటే ఒకటి 30 ఏళ్ళకే పోతారు జనరల్ చెప్తూ ఉంటారు. So after that, once again the Atma goes and merges with Paramatma. That's it. They are not two but one. Now, in order to propagate Advaita philosophy, Shankaracharya started 4 mats or mathas, 4 mats at 4 corners of India. 4 mats, mathamu, to propagate certain philosophy. Like we have Ramakrishna Math kind of. So Adi Shankaracharya propagated Advaita philosophy by setting up of mats. Previous question. The names of the mats and their locations were also asked as the following. To begin with, that is Jyotirmat. Jyotirmat, located at Badrinath. So northern Mutt happened to be Jyoti Mutt. Now come down to south, Sharada Mutt, located at Sringeri. Sharada Mutt located at Sringeri, Karnataka. Jyotir Mutt located at Badrinath, that is Uttarakhand. Come to Eastern Mutt, that is Govardhana Mutt, located at Puri. Eastern Mutt, Govardhana Mutt, located at Puri, Odisha. And finally, the Western Mutt, that is Kalika Mutt, located at Dwaraka. Kalika Mutt, located at Dwaraka, Gujarat. So north, south, east and west. So to avoid confusion, have direction wise so that you can easily remember the stuff. Right? So besides Dvaita philosophy, Adi Shankara also propounded, that is Maya Siddhanta. Maya Siddhanta. The English version of Maya Siddhanta, the theory of illusion. Anta Maya ani cheppadu. The theory of illusion, right? Maya Siddhanta. So when you understand the summary of Maya Siddhanta, the world is unreal, right? If you feel that the world is real because of your avidya, ignorance, right? Because of your ignorance, you are feeling that the world is real. Right? So world is unreal, right? So Maya place. నేను చెప్పుకోవడానికి బాగుంటాను సరే ముచ్చట పక్కన పెట్టి సాల్వేషన్ గురించి ఏం చెప్పినాడు అది చెప్పు సార్ ఓకే సో as far as salvation is concerned, Shankaracharya propounded a path called Gnana Marg or Gnana Marga. The English version of Gnana Marg or Gnana Marg, the path of knowledge. Jnana, knowledge, the path of knowledge. So for salvation, Shankaracharya propounded a path called Gnana Marg or the knowledge of path. And the question is how one can acquire knowledge, how one can acquire Gnana, and he suggests that go through Vedas. So through Vedas, you can learn the stuff, knowledge, and once you get knowledge, you are going to get salvation. It was a summary of Advaita philosophy. And many scholars, the historians branded Adi Shankaracharya was not a Bhakti scholar, because except Bhakti, he spoke everything, right? Bhakti scholar, Bhakti movement means ekkada chinnagani cheppalanu Bhakti ani addappa mottham cheppaడు. So Adi Shankaracharya happened to be not Bhakti saint. Then why the hell you are discussing? Because he started the so-called philosophies and all that. And you can't imagine, say, Hindu philosophy, especially from medieval ages, without Adi Shankaracharya. So we generally discuss Bhakti movement with Adi Shankaracharya. Now, besides Adi Shankaracharya, now actual Bhakti scholar, that is Ramanuja Acharya. So Ramanuja, see, Acharya is one of the titles in Sanskrit learning, please. Acharya. So Ramanuja Acharya lived in 11th century AD, Tamil Nadu. And he was a native of Sri Perumbudur, Tamil Nadu. Ramanujacharya was a native of Sri Perumbudur. And the significance of Ramanujacharya the first Bhakti saint in South India, right? Obviously, he spoke in Bhakti, right? So, first Bhakti saint in South India, right? Ramanuja. Same, how Adi Shankaracharya or Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya have different the titles, how he was associated with Brahmanical religion and how he acquired knowledge by going through Vedas, Shastras and all. The same towards Ramanujacharya. He was also Brahmin by caste. As I was telling, maximum Bhakti saints happen to be Brahmins because they were responsible for inserting so many so very narrow-minded and rigid, conservative other stuff. So the same people made efforts to pluck out these conservative elements. The contemporary sources tell us Ramanujacharya served as a priest in Sri Rangam temple. He served as a chief priest, Pradhan Archakudu antam Telugulo. He served as a chief priest in Srirangam temple. What is the religious significance of Srirangam? Prasadam Bhavanta sir, huh? Right. So the religious significance of Srirangam, Sri Ranganatha temple, Vaishnavism. Right? Sri Ranganatha, one of the forms of Lord Vishnu. Right? Sri Ranganatha temple. Adi Shankaracharya came up with a new sect called Hari Hara sect. When it comes to Ramanujacharya, came up with a new sect, that is Sri Vaishnavism. Sri Vaishnavism. So Sri Vaishnavism happened to be the subsect of Vaishnavism, we call it. Subsect of Vaishnavism. So we have, in Hinduism, we have two broader sects, Shaivism and Vaishnavism. Within Shaivism, we have subsects. Within Shaivism, we have subsects. So for example, we have Shuddha Shaivism. We have the Pashupata sect of Shaivism. We have Veera Shaivism. And within Pashupata sect, we have subsects. Shuddha Shaivism, Pashupata sect, Veera Shaivism. And we have others. Within Pashupata sect, we have Kapalika sect, Kalamukha sect, Aghora sect, sects, subsects, further subsects. After the same towards Vaishnavism. In Vaishnavism, we have many subsects. Now, one of the subsects, that is Sri Vaishnavism. One of the subsects of Vaishnavism, that is Veera Vaishnavism. Palanati Brahmanayudu. Not your Bali Babu, please. Huh? And what the Bhagavan is yesterday. You know, watch a cinema? Danna met the watch a content. Right. Fine. So Veera Vaishnavism, right? Veera Vaishnavism, one of the prime ministers of Macharla, so one of the regional Andhra kingdoms, the prime minister of Macharla by name Palanati Brahmanayudu was responsible for coming up with a new philosophy, a new subsect in Vaishnavism called Veera Vaishnavism. So Sri Vaishnavism. So if someone asks the question, what is the difference between Vaishnavism and Sri Vaishnavism? In Vaishnavism, so Vaishnavids, the followers of Lord Vishnu and the 10 incarnations of Lord Vishnu. Then how about Sri Vaishnavids? Sri Vaishnavids, no doubt, they follow Lord Vishnu, but not 10 incarnations. They consider Lord Vishnu took only one incarnation, that is Krishna. That's it. The real incarnation of Lord Vishnu, that is Krishna. They believe only one incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Right? Matsya, Rama, so only Lord Vishnu took only one incarnation, that is Krishna incarnation, according to Sri Vaishnavism, which was started by Ramanuja Acharya. So as far as philosophy of Ramanujacharya is concerned, so these gentlemen associated with Vishishtadvaita. Vishishtadvaita philosophy. The English version of Vishishtadvaita philosophy, that is qualified non-dualism. Right? Qualified non-dualism. Strictly speaking, he copied the version of Adi Shankaracharya, the old wine in a new bottle kind of. The same wine ade dantlo daate bore kodutadannamata. So new bottle, right? The taagutula kind of, right? So Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism. Same Atma Paramatma concept. So Atma comes from Paramatma, lives on the earth maybe 100 years or 120 years, and again goes and merges with Paramatma. So Ramanujacharya. So as far as Ramanujacharya is concerned, like when I was telling Ramanujacharya, 11th century AD, we have learnt as part of medieval Indian history, especially early medieval age, 11th century South India was dominated by Cholas, Tanjavur Cholas, and especially from the days of Kulothonga Chola onwards, we found extreme sectarian rivalry between Vaishnavites and Shaivites. And obviously, it was Ramanujacharya who was promoting Vaishnavism, especially Sri Vaishnavism. The entire information got to know by his master, Kulothonga Cholan. So Kulothonga Cholan ordered, what do we call, his soldiers at any cost, the gentleman to be what we call, say, kept in jail. The entire information got to know by Ramanujacharya. He simply ran away from Tanjavur Cholas and he took shelter in the other, what we call, say, Karnataka kingdom. Just write down one statement. Kulothonga Cholan followed intoleration policy towards Vaishnavites. Thereby, along with his followers, Ramanuja took shelter in the court of Vishnuvardhana, the ruler of Hoysala kingdom. So Hoysalas, as far as Hoysalas are concerned, we have learnt that is how Deccan divided into two halves after the death of Kalyani Chalukyans, or after decline of Kalyani Chalukyans. North Deccan and South Deccan apply the same towards South India. After the decline of Cholas, the Chola territory is divided into two halves, that is eastern Chola territories dominated by Pandyas, western Chola territories dominated by Hoysalas. Pandyan capital was Madurai, Hoysala capital was Dwara Samudra. So the rulers of Hoysala gave shelter to Vaishnavites. And if someone asks the question, మన సినిమాలో కమల్ హాసన్ సార్ని చంపేస్తారు కదా సార్, అట్లా చంపేస్తేనే మనం చూస్తామని వాళ్ళు చంపేశారు అనమాట. No doubt, say Vaishnavites were tortured, no doubt about it. But Kulothonga Cholan did not kill Ramanuja. Reason being, he ran away from it. Right. It's all about, you can, one more fact related to Ramanujacharya, that is, for salvation, he proposed Prapti Marga. Prapti Marga. For salvation, he proposed Prapti Marga. The English version of Prapti Marga, the path of grace. Prapti, grace. The path of grace. So how the Prapti comes, how the grace comes, Ramanujacharya says, when you submit yourself to the God. It's nothing but Bhakti. That is the reason historians branded him as the first Bhakti scholar of South India. So I have small subheading, the books which are written by Ramanuja, please. Vedanta Sara, Vedanta Sangraha, Vedanta Deepika. Vedanta Sara, Vedanta Sangraha, Vedanta Deepika. All books were written by Ramanuja. Which language? Sanskrit language. That's what the first statement says. The Bhakti saints wrote books in Tamil. The Bhakti saints of South India did not write books in Tamil or local language or vernaculars, but they wrote books in Sanskrit. So Vedanta Sara, Vedanta Sangraha, Vedanta Deepika. So for salvation, Shankaracharya proposed a path called Gnana Marga, the path of knowledge. When it comes to Ramanuja, that is Prapti Marga, the knowledge of the Prapti Marga, the grace path or path of grace. Right, it's all about Ramanuja, please. Next, Madhava. Madhavacharya. So lived in 13th century, Madhavacharya. And he was a native of Sringeri, Karnataka. Please. Madhava was a native of Sringeri. What is the significance of Sringeri? Yes, one of the mutts. Sringeri is a venue for one of the mutts of Shankaracharya. So in order to propagate Advaita philosophy, Shankaracharya started 4 mutts. When it comes to southernmost mutt happened to be Sringeri. So let us understand in this way, Madhavacharya was associated with Advaita philosophy. Same, was a Brahmin by caste, learned some XYZ stuff and associated with Advaita philosophy. So over a period of time, he got fed up with Advaita philosophy and came up with a new philosophy called Dvaita philosophy. Madhava came up with a new philosophy called Dvaita. The English version of Dvaita? Dualism. Dualism. And he further says, the world is reality. His master says the world is illusion. Right? So Madhavacharya says, Atma is different, Paramatma is different. When it comes to his master, Atma comes from Paramatma, lives on the earth for a few years and again goes back to Paramatma. Right? So not but two but one. When it comes to here, his disciple by name Madhava, he came up with Dvaita philosophy, the English version of Dvaita philosophy, dualism, and he says the world is real. One more fact related to Madhava, that is, he also proposed a path called Prapti Marga. Madhava also proposed a path called Prapti Marga. So another prominent Bhakti saint from South India. Right? Another prominent Bhakti saint from South India, Nimbarka. This gentleman was a native of Andhra region. And he lived in 13th and 14th centuries. When it comes to Nimbarka, he came up with a philosophy called Dvaita Advaitamu. The English version of Dvaita, dualistic and non-dualism. And in some text, Dvaita, Dvaita also referred as Bheda, Bheda. Bheda, Bheda. Right? See, Nimbarka made efforts to, the bring a kind of unity between the followers of Madhavacharya and the followers of Shankaracharya. So he became the bridge between Advaita philosophy of Shankaracharya and Dvaita philosophy of Madhavacharya. That is the reason he came up with a new philosophy called Dvaita Dvaita, popularly called as Bheda Bheda. Eldam. A half an hour, Eldam. So Nimbarka. And as far as Nimbarka is concerned, he promoted Krishna Bhakti. Krishna Bhakti. How Ramanujacharya promoted Vishnu Bhakti, Nimbarka promoted Krishna Bhakti. Can we call Ramanujacharya as Sadguna Saint or Niguna Saint? Can we call Nimbarka as Sadguna Saint or Niguna Saint? Can we call Shankaracharya as Saguna Saint or Niguna Saint? Let me tell you, we were discussing, all happen to be Saguna Saints. Niguna is the one who promotes one's bhakti without image worship. So all these, the best example of bhakti saints of South India, right from Adi Shankaracharya, they were associated with Saguna sect, Harihara sect, and to promote mathas, right? Followed by Ramanujacharya, Vaishnavism, Krishna Bhakti, Vishnu Bhakti. Besides Vishnu Bhakti, he also promoted Krishna Bhakti, because Sri Vaishnavism is nothing but, besides Vishnu, the only real incarnation happened to be Krishna. Apply the same towards Madhava. Madhava also promoted the Vishnu Bhakti. When it comes to Nimbarka, he promoted Krishna Bhakti. And he wrote a book called, Nimbarka wrote a book called, said write down name of the book, that is Vedanta Parijata Saurabham. Vedanta Parijata Saurabham. In Sanskrit language, right? And another prominent Bhakti saint from South India, Vallabhacharya. th and 16th centuries. And if someone asks the question, what is the path proposed by Nimbarka for salvation? Same path, that is Prapti Marga, Bhakti saint, Prapti Marga. So Vallabhacharya, originally the gentleman belonged to Telangana region, but he was born in Kashi. Vallabha. So on one hand, we were saying he was the native of Telangana region, but how he was born in Kashi. Very simple. We have one of the sacred elements in Hinduism, not only Hinduism, in almost all religions, that is making pilgrimages. Right? Tirthayatra antam. So the parents of Vallabhacharya, they had been to Kashi, and during the pilgrimages, he was born at Kashi. So basically, was was a native of Telangana region. So Vallabhacharya. So he came up with a new philosophy called Shuddha Dvaita. The pure non-dualism, right? The pure non-dualism. The same concept of Shankaracharya, please. Pure non-dualism. And for salvation, he proposed a path called Pushti Marga. Jnana Marga, Prapti Marga, Pushti Marga. For salvation, Vallabhacharya proposed a path called Pushti Marga. Once again, the path of grace. Path of grace. Once again, bhakti, please. How grace comes? When you submit yourself to the God. It's nothing but bhakti, mysticism. Right? Next, that is Sri Padacharya, please. Sri Padacharya. Lived in 15th century, Tamil Nadu. Was a native of Carnatic region, not Karnataka, modern Karnataka. Karnataka is a small kingdom in Tamil Nadu, please, near Madurai. Carnatic, was a native of Carnatic. He promoted Vishnu Bhakti through Haridasa movement. Right? Haridasa movement. Sripadacharya promoted Vishnu Bhakti through a movement called Haridasa. So when you observe the Hindu cultures, Hindu festivals, traditions during Sankranti, so these people come, Haridasulu antam. So Haridasulu ante, like they sing small songs which are in praise of Lord Vishnu. Haridasa movement. And it was Sripadacharya, he also invented the music through music and through small steps, like dance. When I say dance, devotional dance he call it, through music and dance promoting Lord Vishnu or promoting the Vishnu Bhakti. And this music, since born and brought up in Carnatic, the music is named after Carnatic. Today we call it Carnatic music. So the father of Carnatic music, no second thought, Sri Padacharya. I repeat, Carnatic is nothing to do with modern Karnataka. Karnataka is a small kingdom in Tamil Nadu, Tanjavur, Madurai region today. Carnatic music. What is the official dance form of Andhra Pradesh? Kuchipudi. Kuchipudi is a small village which comes in Krishna district of Andhra Pradesh. Kuchipudi. So the dance form born and brought up in Kuchipudi. So Kuchipudi we call it. Music, Carnatic music. And finally, Annamacharya, modern Akkini Nagarjuna. Annamaya or Annamacharya. Tallapaka Annamaya, all are same. He also lived in 15th century. Annamacharya lived in 15th century. Was a native of Tallapaka near Rajampet, Kadapa district. Modern Annamaya district. Right? How many of you are from Andhra Pradesh? Annamaya district. So Annamacharya lived in 15th century AD, was a native of Tallapaka near Rajampeta, Annamaya district today, and he promoted Balaji Bhakti or Lord Venkateshwara, popularly called as Kali Yuga. Lord Venkateshwara, popularly called as Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga Devam, Kali Yuga Vishnu alanti em leva. It's Kali Yuga Devam, Kali Yuga Vishnu anukuntuntaru. So now the forms of Lord Vishnu, please. Then sir, 10 ani chepparu kada, Dasha ani chepparu kada, right from Matsya to Kalki. Right from Matsya to Kalki. Now we have the Prabandham. As part of Alvars we have learnt, Prabandham refers and other Vaishnava texts refers, besides 10 incarnations, we have 3 incarnations of Lord Vishnu. One is Vithoba or Vithala, Panduranga and Venkateshwara. Lord Vithoba, Vithala, Pandharpur, Maharashtra. Panduranga and Venkateshwara. Right. So Annamacharya promoted Venkateshwara Bhakti or Balaji Bhakti in North India. Venkateshwara popularly called as Lord Venkateshwara, popularly called as Balaji, please. So he promoted Venkateshwara Bhakti by writing kirtanas. By writing kirtanas. A tradition says totally 32,000 kirtanas written by Annamacharya. Out of 32,000 kirtanas, only 8,000 kirtanas are available at present. Only 8,000 kirtanas. Obviously, the credit goes to TTD, Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam. So, TTD playing crucial role in preserving the kirtanas, whatever kirtanas which are available at different places, in preserving them. So, kirtanas, the small songs which were sung in praise of Venkateshwara, Lord Venkateshwara. So, kirtanas we call them. Right, it's all about Bhakti movement in South India. So, it started with Adi Shankaracharya. Though Adi Shankaracharya happened to be the scholar, but he was not the great scholar in Hindu philosophy, Hindu literature, especially Sanskrit literature. But maximum scholars won't accept him as Bhakti saint, because except Bhakti, he spoke everything, right? Followed by Ramanujacharya, the first Bhakti saint in South India, and his path, what was the path of Ramanujacharya? That is Prapti Marga, right? And he was responsible for a new sect within Vaishnavism, that is Sri Vaishnavism. And need not to tell you the image of the statue of Ramanujacharya near Hyderabad. So, Madhavacharya lived in 13th century, and his philosophy was Dvaita, dualism. It's quite interesting to know, though he was the disciple of Shankaracharya, due to some differences, he opposed the philosophy of Shankaracharya, that is non-dualism, and came up with dualism. If Shankaracharya says the Maya Siddhanta, he says the world is real. Followed by Nimbarka, who came up with Dvaita Dvaita, otherwise called as Bheda Bheda. And Vallabhacharya, finally Sripadacharya and Annamacharya. Now start with Bhakti movement hyphen Deccan or Maharashtra. So discussing Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement, born and brought up in South India, travelled to Deccan, from Deccan to North India, from Deccan to Western India, and from Deccan to Eastern India. So Bhakti movement, Maharashtra. So Bhakti scholars from South India all happen to be Sadguna scholars, Sadguna sect. When it comes to in Deccan, besides Sadguna, we have found Niguna scholars, Niguna sect. Just write down one previous question. Bhakti movement in Deccan, Bhakti movement in Deccan was a mixture. Bhakti movement in Deccan was a mixture. For your convenience, Saguna plus Niguna, please. Second statement. There were radical Bhakti saints from Maharashtra. There were radical Bhakti saints from Maharashtra. So same options. Option A only one correct, only B correct, only say both 1 and 2 are correct, and option D neither 1 nor 2. So Vasanta says only 2. Any other? The right answer for this question, option C. Both these statements are correct. Right? See here, when I say radical, compared with Saguna rulers, Saguna scholars, Niguna scholars happen to be little bit radical. Right? So for example, I am just giving an example of Kabir. Right? Kabir, he outrightly rejected the rituals and sacrifices of Hindus and outrightly rejected the rituals and sacrifices of Muslims. So when we compared with Saguna rituals, when someone started the opposing, when someone started say criticizing, in this connection we are supposed to understand these people as radical. So we found for the first time in Maharashtra or Deccan, that is like the radical Bhakti saints. Right? So discussing Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement, born and brought up in South India, travelled to Deccan in 13th century, travelled to North India in 15th century, travelled to Western India in 16th century, and travelled to Eastern India also in 16th century. Right? Now start with Gnaneshwar or Gnana Deva. Gnaneshwar or Gnana Deva. The first Bhakti saint in Deccan place. Gnaneshwar or Gnana Deva. Lived in 13th century Maharashtra. 13th century Maharashtra. So from Bhakti movement Deccan onwards, you shall keep in mind Bhakti scholars wrote books in vernaculars. Now we were discussing Bhakti movement in Maharashtra. So some XYZ Bhakti scholars wrote books in Marathi language. The moment we enter into North India, respective Bhakti scholars wrote books in vernaculars, Hindi, Braj Bhasha and other languages. Apply the same towards Eastern India and Western India. Only South Indian Bhakti scholars wrote books in Sanskrit language. So as far as Gnaneshwar is concerned, so books which are written by Gnaneshwar, one among them was Bhavarta Deepika. Bhavarta Deepika, otherwise called as Gnaneshwari. Bhavarta Deepika, also called as Gnaneshwari, and popularly called as Marathi Gita. Please just imagine what kind of importance Marathis give to this book. Marathi Gita. Bhagavad Gita in which language? Sanskrit language. So what is Bhagavad Gita for Sanskrit language? Bhavarta Deepika for Marathi language. That is the reason Bhavarta Deepika, otherwise called as Marathi Gita. Please. Marathi Gita. So the second book, Amritanubhava. Please. Amritanubhava. So these are the two books which are written by Gnaneshwar, the first Bhakti saint in Maharashtra. So the significance of Bhavarta Deepika, popularly called as Marathi Gita, the first text available in Marathi language. The first text available in Marathi language. Next, Namdev. Who lived in 14th century. Namdev lived in 14th century Maharashtra, and is, when you call Gnaneshwari, so Gnaneshwar promoted Vithala Bhakti, Pandharpur, Vithala Bhakti, one of the forms of Lord Vishnu, right? Vithala Bhakti, right? Gnaneshwar, you also call him as a Saguna Bhakti saint, right? SBS, Saguna Bhakti saint. When it comes to Namdev, who lived in 14th century Maharashtra, these gentlemen belonged to Niguna Bhakti sect. Right? Niguna Bhakti sect. Strictly speaking, by profession he was a robber, please. Bandit, like Valmiki, please. అంటే బుక్కులు రాలంటే జైలు అట్లా అవసరం లేదన్నమాట. చాలామంది ఆత్మకథలను జీవిత కథలను జైల్లో రాస్తారు, మేము కూడా వెళ్ళాలని సార్ అని చెప్తాం. ఇవే తగ్గించుకోమని చెప్పేది. నెహ్రూ గారు, గాంధీ గారు జైల్లో కూర్చొని రాసుకున్నారు కదా, ఇవన్నీ వద్దన్నమాట. రైట్. సో బై ప్రొఫెషన్ వాజ్ ఏ రాబర్ అండ్ ఓవర్ ఏ పీరియడ్ ఆఫ్ టైమ్ గాట్ ఎన్లైటన్మెంట్, హౌ సిద్ధార్థ గౌతమ గాట్ ఎన్లైటన్మెంట్. సో he became like the disciple of Gnanadev, and from Gnanadev he entered in the life of spirituality, right? But he promoted Niguna Bhakti sect. When I say Niguna Bhakti sect, that is you suppose not to worship images, right? No image worship and no rituals and sacrifices. Niguna Bhakti sect, right? And you also add one more point as far as Namdev is concerned. He used to go to Delhi, please, to involve philosophical discussions with Sufi saints. So philosophical discussions with Sufi saints. Even this is one of the reasons, like he became Niguna Bhakti saint, Namdev. And another prominent Bhakti saint from Deccan, Maharashtra, Eknath, North Shinde, please. Eknath, lived in 16th century. Eknath. And he also promoted Vithala Bhakti. Marathi scholars, Marathi Bhakti saints, all Bhakti saints promoted Vithala Bhakti, Pandharpur. So Eknath wrote a book called Bhavarta Ramayan. Bhavarta Ramayan, which is a commentary on Bhagavata Purana. Bhavarta Ramayan happened to be the commentary on Bhagavata Purana. Like Jnaneshwar, he also promoted Vithala Bhakti. Like Jnaneshwar, Eknath also promoted Vithala Bhakti by writing Abhangas. How Annamacharya promoted Venkateshwara Bhakti by writing Kirtanas, up to the same two words. Eknath promoted Vithala Bhakti by writing Abhangas. So Kirtanas are nothing but the small songs which were sung in praise of Lord Venkateshwara. Same, the small songs which were praised, which were sung in praise of Lord Vithoba, Vithala Bhakti, one of the forms of Lord Vishnu. So recently, Telangana state CM had been to Pandharpur, right? అక్కడికి వెళ్ళి పూజలు చేసి వచ్చాడు. ఇక్కడ కూడా మా పార్టీని. Right. So it's all about Eknath. And one more, Tukaram lived in 17th century. Tukaram, popularly called as Bhakti Tukaram, 17th century. Popularly called as Bhakti Tukaram. In some texts you also come across Tukoba. In South India, when we observe Bhakti movement in South India, Bhakti movement in Deccan, Bhakti movement in South India we found mixed. Besides Shaivism, we also found Vaishnavism. When it comes to in Deccan, Maharashtra, the entire Vaishnavism. Say Vithoba, Vithala and all that. As far as Tukoba or Tukaram is concerned, lived in 17th century, authored many books. One among them was Vithala Ramayan. Like Eknath, Tukaram also wrote Abhangas. He also wrote Abhangas, which were in praise of Lord Vithoba. And Tukaram was the contemporary of Samartha Ramadas. So next prominent Bhakti saint from Maharashtra, Deccan, Samartha Ramadas. Samartha Ramadas lived in 17th century and was a spiritual saint of Shivaji. Spiritual saint of Shivaji, Samartha Ramadas. Samartha Ramadas, being a Marathi Bhakti saint, he exerted a lot of influence on Shivaji. We are going to discuss. There are so many reasons forced Shivaji to stood, and we consider him as the custodian of Hindu religion and Hindu culture. One of the main forces happened to be Samartha Ramadas. It was Samartha Ramadas who taught Shivaji the greatness of Hindu culture and Hindu religion. It was Samartha Ramadas who used to imbibe the Sanskrit versions, the Sanskrit the slogans of Ramayana. That is Janani Janmabhumichya Swargadapi Gariyasi. So the mother and mother country is always higher than your heaven. So this is how Shivaji, like determined to protect Hindu culture, Hindu dharma from onslaughts of Muslims. So as far as Samartha Ramadas is concerned, the one or two books of Samartha Ramadas, one among them was Dasha Bandhava, Dasha Bandhava, Dasha Bandhava. Vithala Purana, another book, right? Vithala Purana. And finally, Bhavani Purana. Bhavani Purana. So, all the books which are written by Samartha Ramadas, the spiritual master, the spiritual saint of Shivaji. Right, it's all about Bhakti movement in Maharashtra. So, I have subheading Bhakti movement in North India. Right? So, as far as Bhakti movement in North India is concerned, Bhakti movement in Western India and Eastern India is concerned, we'll have a pause. In the next class, we'll continue Bhakti movement in North India, Western India, Eastern India, followed by Sufi movement. So, with this, we'll be able to complete the chapter called Delhi Sultanate, followed by provincial governments.